The surveyor found two monuments, not a lawsuit, not a confrontation. A man with survey instruments standing at the eastern boundary of the Holloway Family Land Trust in June 2023, looking at two iron pins where his deed description said there should be one. He called his client. "Ms. Holloway, I'm on the eastern boundary. I'm looking at a survey monument that doesn't match your deed description." The first was a standard iron pin with a brass cap. Holloway Family Surveyor's mark, set in 1967, exactly where it had always been. The second was different cap, surveyor's initials worn off, set approximately 340 acres west of the first one, sometime between 2001 and 2005. Use the second monument as your boundary reference, and 340 acres of Holloway land becomes someone else's parcel. Someone had moved the line. Margaret Holloway drove back from Nashville that afternoon and stood at the eastern shore of Holloway Lake while her surveyor walked her through what he'd found. Across the water, 99 luxury lakefront homes, docks, boat lifts, the back elevations of an entire community built on the wrong side of that line. Her family had owned that lake since 1938. Her great-grandmother Ruth had bought 1,100 acres in pre-war Tennessee, a black woman acquiring land at that scale in 1938, over whatever resistance that required. She held it through the Depression, through the war years, through every decade of Tennessee history that followed. She passed it down 4 times, to Marge's grandfather, to her father, to Marge, into the Holloway Family Land Trust, where it had sat, recorded and unambiguous, for 85 years. In 2003, a developer named Preston Ware had hired a surveyor named Carl Hobbs, whose license would be revoked 3 years later for identical fraud in 3 other Tennessee counties, to file a boundary survey that absorbed 340 of those acres into his development parcel. He then granted himself a road easement on land he didn't own, signing as both grantor and grantee. He built 99 homes, collected $48.2 million, dissolved his company, moved to Sarasota, Florida. He had been there 15 years when David Kwan found the second monument. Marge didn't call the HOA. She called her attorney. 11 months later, the Cumberland County Circuit Court expunged the fraudulent survey from the public record, declared the void easement void, and confirmed the Holloway Family Land Trust as the sole owner of all 1,100 acres, the same land Ruth Holloway had purchased on April 7, 1938. Preston Ware sold his Sarasota waterfront home to fund a $4.8 million settlement. It started with a surveyor and 2 monuments at the same boundary point. He found the line. Marge moved it back. Before we start, tell me where you're listening from today. And if you're enjoying the content, hit like and subscribe for more stories just like this. The boat launch had been my idea for 3 years. Not a commercial operation, nothing elaborate. A simple concrete ramp on the eastern lakefront, wide enough for a flat-bottom fishing boat, with a gravel turnaround and a small dock. Something my grandchildren could use in the summers, something I could use year-round. Holloway Lake had been in my family's possession since 1938, and in all that time, no one had ever put a formal launch on the eastern shore. The western shore had the old dock my grandfather built in the 1940s, still serviceable, but the eastern shore had better depth and a cleaner approach from the county road. I'd been meaning to do it since I took over management of the Holloway Family Land Trust in 2019. Life intervenes. The trust paperwork, the tax filings, the fence maintenance, the timber management on the northern acreage, 1,000 small tasks that constitute the ongoing work of holding 1,100 acres in Tennessee's Cumberland County, and keeping them in the condition your great-grandmother would recognize. By June 2023, I'd finally cleared enough of the backlog to move on the launch. David Kwan had been my surveyor for 6 years. He'd done the 2019 survey when I took over the trust. A full boundary confirmation, all 4 sides, every monument located and photographed. He was precise, methodical, the kind of surveyor who treated discrepancies as problems to be solved, rather than anomalies to be noted and moved past. He started the eastern boundary work on a Monday morning in June. I was in Nashville, a routine appointment with the trust's financial advisor, when my phone rang Tuesday afternoon. "Ms. Holloway." His voice had the careful quality I'd learned to recognize in 6 years of working with him. The voice of someone who has found something unexpected and is choosing his words precisely before delivering it. I'm on the eastern boundary. I'm looking at a survey monument that doesn't match your deed description. I felt the specific alertness that comes after 30 years as a civil engineer when a field measurement doesn't agree with the design document. What are you seeing? There are two monuments at what should be the same boundary point. The first one matches your 1967 deed survey. It's a standard iron pin with a brass cap, Holloway family surveyor's mark, set according to the 1967 plat. The second one is approximately 340 acres west of the first one. Different installation, different cap mark. Based on the weathering pattern, I date the second one to somewhere between 2001 and 2005. I did the calculation instinctively. A civil engineer doesn't stop doing field geometry just because she's retired. 340 acres, on the eastern boundary, between my 1967 monument and a monument someone had set after 2001. Someone moved the line, I said. The 1967 monument is correct per your deed description. I've cross-referenced it against the original plat and the 1989 resurvey. It's exactly where it should be. A pause. The second monument shouldn't exist, and someone filed something using it as a reference point, because there's disturbed ground around it consistent with an official survey installation, rather than an accidental marker. I'll be there in 2 hours. I drove back from Nashville on I-40 with the specific focus of someone who knows a problem has presented itself and needs to understand its full dimensions before deciding what to do about it. The eastern lakefront in June, the light coming long and gold across Holloway Lake, the water doing what Cumberland County lake water does in early summer, holding the sky in it, the color somewhere between blue and green, depending on the cloud cover. 85 years my family had held this lake. My great-grandmother Ruth Holloway had purchased the land in 1938, 1,100 acres, the lake entirely enclosed within the boundaries, a transaction that had required extraordinary determination from a black woman in pre-war Tennessee acquiring property at that scale. I'd grown up on this land, swum in this lake, learned to read survey plats at my grandfather's kitchen table. I knew every acre of it. David was waiting at the eastern boundary when I arrived. He'd flagged both monuments with orange surveying tape, the 1967 pin and the later one, 340 acres apart, both visible from where we stood. He walked me through it methodically. The 1967 monument, iron pin, brass cap stamped with the Holloway family surveyor's initials and the survey date, set at the coordinates described in the Holloway family land trust deed, exactly where the boundary had always been. The later monument, iron pin, different cap, no surveyor's initials visible, the stamp worn or intentionally obscured, set at a point 340 acres west of the true boundary. If you use the later monument as your eastern boundary reference, as the starting point for your survey, you would describe a parcel that included 340 acres of Holloway family land trust property as part of whatever you were surveying. David pulled his laptop. He'd already been into the Cumberland County Register of Deeds online database. There's a boundary survey filed in 2003, he said. Ware Development LLC. It describes the Lakeshore Commons development parcel. He turned the laptop toward me. Look at the eastern boundary coordinates. I looked. The 2003 survey used the later monument as its eastern boundary reference. The parcel it described, the Lakeshore Commons development parcel, included everything between the later monument and the true Holloway boundary. 340 acres of Holloway family land trust property, described in a 2003 survey as part of the Ware Development LLC parcel. I stood at the eastern boundary of my family's land for a long moment. The lake was visible from where we stood, the eastern shoreline curving north and south, the water catching the late afternoon light. And beyond the water, on the far shore, rooftops, docks, boat lifts, the back elevations of 99 luxury homes, their lakefront decks facing the water, their rear facades visible from this angle, built on the far side of Holloway Lake, on land that my deed said was mine. He built their houses on my land, I said. David was quiet for a moment. Then, there's something else. He pulled up the county road records on his laptop. The access road to the development, Lakeshore Drive. It runs from the county highway through the corridor between your northern and eastern boundaries before it enters the development. He pointed north along the boundary line. 2.1 miles of road, Based on the 1967 monument placement and your deed description, the entire road corridor is within the Holloway Family Land Trust boundary. I looked north along the tree line. Their road runs through my property. The full 2.1 miles. There's a road easement recorded in 2003, same year as the survey. Ware Development LLC as grantor. He paused. Ms. Holloway, the grantor of that easement is the same entity as the grantee. Ware Development granted a road easement to Ware Development on land that, based on the 1967 survey, Ware Development didn't own. I turned that over in my mind. Preston Ware had filed a fraudulent survey in 2003 that absorbed 340 acres of my family's land into his development parcel. He had then granted himself a road easement on that land, signing as both grantor and grantee on land the grantor didn't own, and used that self-granted void easement as the legal basis for the only road serving 99 homes. He had built an entire development on a foundation of fraud, sold 99 homes to 99 families, collected his money, dissolved his company in 2009, and moved to Florida. 20 years ago. The homes had been there for 20 years. The families had been there for nearly 20 years. Title insurance policies had been issued. Mortgages had been taken out. Children had grown up in those houses. And the land those houses sat on, and the road those families drove every day, had belonged to the Holloway Family Land Trust since April 7, 1938. I stood at the boundary line. My great-grandmother Ruth had been told, by more people than she ever named to her children, that a black woman couldn't hold land like that in Tennessee in 1938, that it wouldn't last, that the world would find a way to take it back. She'd held it anyway, through the Depression, through the war years, through the decades of Tennessee history that had not been gentle to black land ownership. She'd held it and passed it to my grandfather, and he'd passed it to my father, and my father had passed it to me through the trust. 85 years of unbroken title. And Preston Ware had filed a survey in 2003 that moved the line. Not by purchasing the land, not by any legal mechanism, by filing a document with a fraudulent monument reference and a licensed surveyor's seal. A seal belonging to a man named Carl Hobbs, whose license, I would later learn, had been revoked in 2006 for fraud-related conduct in 3 other counties. I looked at the lake one more time. Then I picked up my phone. James Okafor had been my property attorney for 4 years, a fraud specialist in Nashville who'd been recommended to me by 2 colleagues in the engineering community who dealt with boundary disputes. He answered on the 3rd ring. James, I need you to pull everything on a 2003 boundary survey filed by Ware Development LLC in Cumberland County, and a road easement from the same year, same filer. I paused. Someone filed a fraudulent survey that moved my family's eastern boundary 340 acres west. I'm standing at the original 1967 monument right now. A silence. How long has it been on record? 20 years. There are 99 homes on the other side of it. Another silence, longer. And the road? Self-granted easement on land the grantor didn't own. The only access road to all 99 homes runs 2.1 miles through Holloway Family Land Trust property. James was quiet, with the specific quality of an attorney processing the full dimensions of what he's being told. I'll pull the records tonight. Can you get me David Kwan's field notes and photographs from today? He'll send them within the hour. Eleanor, he caught himself. Marge, this is going to be a significant case. I know what it is, I said. I looked one last time at the 99 rooftops visible across my lake. My great-grandmother had purchased this land in 1938. She had held it through everything Tennessee had offered in the way of resistance to that holding. She had passed it through 4 generations to me. Preston Ware had moved the line in 2003 and built 99 homes on the wrong side of it. I was going to move it back. James called back on Friday morning. 4 days of work. Cumberland County deed records, the full Holloway Family Land Trust chain from 1938 forward, the 2003 Ware Development Survey filing, the road easement documents, corporate records for Ware Development LLC, and a background search on Carl Hobbs, the licensed surveyor whose seal appeared on the 2003 boundary survey. I was at the kitchen table with coffee and my grandfather's original 1938 deed abstract, the same habit I'd had since taking over the trust in 2019. reviewing the chain periodically the way a doctor reviews a patient's history when something new presents itself. The abstract was 85 years of clean, sequential, unambiguous recordings, every transfer documented, every boundary confirmed, every tax payment current. The kind of title chain that takes generations to build and one fraudulent survey to complicate. Start with the title chain, I said. The Holloway family land trust chain is unbroken from April 7, 1938 through the present day. Every instrument recorded, every transfer properly executed, every tax payment documented. I had a title examiner run the full chain independently. She spent 2 days on it and arrived at the same conclusion I did. He paused. Marge, your family's title to all 1,100 acres, including the 340 acres absorbed by the Ware survey, has never been extinguished. It has been continuous, recorded, and legally intact for 85 years. The fraud didn't transfer the title. Title fraud doesn't transfer title. That's the foundational principle. Preston Ware filed a survey that described your land as his. That filing created a cloud on your title, an encumbrance in the public record that made the boundary appear disputed, but it did not, under Tennessee law or any other law, extinguish your fee simple ownership. You own the 340 acres. You have always owned the 340 acres. The Ware survey is a lie recorded in the public record, not a conveyance. The surveyor's seal, Carl Hobbs. James's voice shifted, the specific tone of someone delivering a finding they've confirmed from multiple sources. Carl Hobbs held a Tennessee surveying license from 1988 through 2006. His seal appears on the 2003 Ware Development Boundary Survey. In 2006, 3 years after he filed that survey, his license was revoked by the Tennessee Board of Examiners for land surveyors. Fraud-related conduct in 3 other counties. The revocation order, which is public record, cites 3 instances of filing boundary surveys that misrepresented parcel dimensions to benefit a developer client. The pattern in those 3 cases is identical to what he did in Cumberland County for Ware, moving boundary lines to absorb adjacent property into a development parcel. I set down the coffee. Carl Hobbs had been doing this in multiple counties. 3 documented instances before Cumberland County. 3 times he'd moved boundary lines for developer clients. 3 times the conduct had been flagged, and by the time his license was revoked in 2006, his 2003 work for Preston Ware had already been in the Cumberland County record for 3 years. The homes had been built in 2004 through 2007. By the time Carl Hobbs lost his license, 99 families were already living on the wrong side of the line he'd drawn. Preston Ware, I said. What's the full picture? Ware Development LLC was registered in Tennessee in 1999. Preston Ware, sole member. The company purchased 180 acres of Cumberland County land adjacent to your eastern boundary in 2001. Legitimately, through a standard arm's-length transaction. That 180-acre parcel is not in dispute. James paused. In 2003, Ware Development filed the fraudulent boundary survey and the self-granted road easement. Between 2004 and 2007, the company built and sold 99 homes. Gross sales revenue, based on the recorded deed prices, was approximately $48,200,000. $48 million, built on a lie. The road easement, I said. Walk me through the legal problem. The easement document is recorded in Cumberland County as document 2003-07841. Grantor, Ware Development LLC. Grantee, Ware Development LLC. He paused. I want to be precise about why this is legally void, not just unusual. An easement is a right granted by a landowner to a third party. It requires 2 distinct legal entities, with the grantor holding actual title to the burdened property. Ware Development did not own the road corridor. The road corridor was Holloway Family Land Trust property. Your title was intact, your ownership was undisturbed. Ware filed a survey claiming your land was his, and then immediately used that fraudulent claim as the basis for granting himself an easement on it. He was the grantor and the grantee of an easement on land he didn't own. Correct. The easement is void ab initio under Tennessee law, void from inception, as if it never existed. It created no legal right. The road has been trespassing on your property for 20 years on the basis of a document that has never had any legal effect. I looked out the kitchen window at the lake, the morning light on Holloway Lake in June, the eastern shoreline visible from the house, the curve of the shore that my great-grandmother had walked, that my grandfather had walked, that I had walked since I was old enough to walk beside adults. The shoreline that a developer had absorbed into his parcel in 2003 and sold to 99 families as their lakefront amenity. What's the current value picture? 99 homes. I heard papers. I pulled the current assessed values and recent comparable sales in the Lakeshore Commons development. Average current market value, $620,000. Range from $480,000 to $890,000, depending on lot position and lakefront footage. He paused. Total residential property value sitting on Holloway Family Land Trust land, $61,380,000. $61 million. Built on 340 acres of my family's land and accessed by a void easement across 2.1 miles of my family's road corridor. Title insurance, I said. Every one of the 99 homeowners has a title insurance policy, issued at closing, standard practice. 3 different insurers cover the development: Meridian Title, Continental Land Title, and First American. Meridian covers 61 homes, Continental covers 24, First American covers 14. He paused. Marge, those 3 companies are going to have a very difficult week when this comes out. I thought about the title insurers. 3 companies that had issued policies guaranteeing clear title to 99 homes built on a fraudulent survey. Policies that were now, from the moment James filed the quiet title action, activated by a legitimate competing claim. That's their problem, I said. My problem is getting my land back. James was quiet for a moment. I'll draft the formal notice to the HOA today. We'll send it certified mail, to the registered HOA address and to their attorney of record. What are you asking for? An immediate meeting to discuss resolution. I'll frame it as cooperative. The trust is aware of the significant hardship a boundary dispute of this nature creates for innocent homeowners, and we're committed to finding a fair resolution. The goal is to establish the legal reality first and negotiate from that foundation. And if they refuse to meet, then we file the quiet title action and the trespass claim and let the court establish the legal reality for us. He paused. Marge, I want to be honest with you about the HOA's likely response. Their attorney is going to tell them to fight this. That's what HOA attorneys do when faced with a claim that threatens the community's property position. What matters is what the HOA president does with that advice. What do you know about Deb Sinclair? Former marketing executive, 5 years as HOA president. Has a reputation in Cumberland County HOA circles for being media aggressive. She's handled previous HOA disputes by going public before going legal. A pause. If she follows her pattern, she'll try to make this a public relations battle before she engages it as a legal one. Let her. Marge. James, my family has held this land for 85 years. The title chain is clean. The fraud is documented. Carl Hobbs lost his license for doing exactly this in 3 other counties. Preston Ware collected $48 million and moved to Florida. I paused. Deb Sinclair can post whatever she wants. The deed is the deed. The formal notice went out on June 19th, 4 pages, plain language with precise legal citations. The Holloway Family Land Trust, as holder of fee simple title to 1,100 acres of Cumberland County land since April 7, 1938, had identified a fraudulent boundary survey filed in 2003 by Ware Development LLC that purported to absorb 340 acres of trust property into the Ware Development parcel. The trust further identified a void road easement recorded in the same year that purported to establish Lakeshore Drive as a legal access road across trust property. The trust was requesting an immediate meeting with the Lakeshore Commons Community Association to discuss a fair and practical resolution, one that acknowledged the trust's legal ownership while addressing the legitimate interests of the 99 homeowners who had purchased their properties in good faith. The notice was delivered and signed for on June 21st. Deb Sinclair's response arrived on June 28th. 2 paragraphs. The Lakeshore Commons Community Association disputed the Holloway Family Land Trust's claims in their entirety. The community had lawfully occupied its land and used its access road for nearly 20 years. The association would defend its members' property rights vigorously through all available legal means. Signed by the HOA's attorney, a general practice firm in Crossville that handled most of the Cumberland County HOA work. James called me with the response summary. 2 paragraphs, he said. No meeting request, no acknowledgement of the survey issues, no engagement with the substance of the notice. And Deb? He was quiet for a moment. Check the Lakeshore Commons Facebook group. I found it within 30 seconds. A public group with 340 members, mostly Lakeshore Commons residents and their extended networks. Deb had posted on June 27th, the day before the formal legal response was sent. The post was long. It began, "Our community needs to know what's happening. A Nashville attorney has sent us a letter claiming that our homes we've owned and loved for nearly 20 years, are built on someone else's land. That our road isn't legally ours. That a family land trust we've never heard of owns everything we thought we owned." It continued for 8 paragraphs. It described the Holloway Family Land Trust as conducting a land grab. It described the quiet title action James was preparing to file as an attempt to take people's homes. It included a photograph of Lakeshore Drive, the road, the homes visible in the background, children's bicycles on a driveway. Captioned, "This is what they want to take from us." It closed with, "We are not going to let this happen. This community has been here for 20 years. We belong here, and we will fight for every family on this road." The post had 847 reactions, 203 comments. It had been shared 412 times. Local news had already picked it up by the time I saw it. A Cookeville television station had run a brief segment, "Cumberland County HOA faces property dispute," that featured 30 seconds of Deb speaking to camera outside her lakefront home. 99 families, that's what's at stake here. 99 families who bought their homes in good faith and are now being told they might not own them. I read the post twice. I looked at the comments, the fear and anger of 99 families who had, in many cases, their entire net worth tied up in a lakefront home that was now being described as legally compromised. I understood it. I didn't dismiss it. Those families were not Preston Ware. They hadn't committed fraud. They'd bought homes in good faith, paid their mortgages, raised their children, and had no knowledge of what the developer had done 20 years ago. Their fear was real, but their fear did not change what the 1938 deed said. I called James. She went public. I saw it. The television segment is already circulating. He paused. "Marge, this is going to get louder before the legal process quiets it down. Deb Sinclair is good at this, framing a legal dispute as a human interest story. File the quiet title action," I said. "And James, draft a public response. I want it filed with the court and released to the same outlets that ran Deb's version." "What do you want it to say?" I thought about my great-grandmother Ruth purchasing this land in 1938, about the 7 banks, or however many it had been. The number changed in the family telling, but the substance didn't, that had told her no. About the singular determination required to hold 1,100 acres in Cumberland County, Tennessee, through 85 years of American history. About Preston Ware filing a survey in 2003 and collecting $48 million and moving to Florida. About Deb Sinclair posting a photograph of children's bicycles and calling it a land grab. Tell them the truth, I said. All of it. The 1938 deed, the Carl Hobbs revocation, the self-granted void easement, Preston Ware's $48 million and his Sarasota address. I paused. Tell them that the Holloway Family Land Trust has held this land for 85 years, and that we are not conducting a land grab. We are defending a title that has never been extinguished against a fraud that a developer committed 20 years ago and left 99 families to deal with when he moved to Florida. James filed the quiet title action on July 2nd. The public response went out the same day. By that evening, the story had a second version in circulation, one that included the words Carl Hobbs, license revocation, self-granted easement, and Sarasota, Florida. The comments on Deb's Facebook post began to change. James filed on July 2nd. 3 actions in a single complaint. 48 pages, clean and sequential, the kind of filing that a court clerk looks at and understands immediately, because the documentation leaves nothing to interpretation. First, quiet title action under Tennessee Code Annotated Section 29-3-101, requesting a judicial declaration that the Holloway Family Land Trust holds fee simple title to all 1,100 acres, including the 340 acres described in the fraudulent 2003 Ware Development Survey, and an order expunging the fraudulent survey from the Cumberland County Public Record. Second, declaration that document 2003-07841, the Ware Development Road easement, was void ab initio, no grantor authority, no valid title in the grantor, no legal effect from inception. Third, trespass damages for 20 years of road use across Holloway Family Land Trust property on the basis of a void instrument. Tennessee's statute of limitations on trespass runs 10 years for continuing trespass. The 10 most recent years of Lakeshore Drive use, at the fair market annual rate for road corridor easement access in Cumberland County, came to $380,000. The filing was public record by July 3rd. Deb Sinclair had clearly been waiting for it. Her first TikTok video went up at 7:14 p.m. on July 3rd. She'd filmed it standing on her lakefront deck, Holloway Lake visible behind her, the summer evening light doing exactly what summer evening light does on a Tennessee lake, which is make everything look like something worth fighting for. She was composed, direct, and had clearly thought about what she wanted to say and how she wanted to look saying it. 99 families, she began. That's what's at stake. Not a corporation, not a developer. 99 families who bought their homes here in good faith, who have been here for nearly 20 years, who have built their lives on this lake. And today, a Nashville attorney filed paperwork that could take it all away. The video was 4 minutes and 20 seconds long. It did not mention Carl Hobbs. It did not mention Preston Ware. It did not mention the fact that the land grab it described had an 85-year deed chain on one side and a fraudulent survey on the other. It featured, near the end, a brief appearance by 2 young children, residents of the development, she explained, who'd grown up on Holloway Lake and didn't understand why someone wanted to take their home. The video had 340,000 views within 48 hours. Local news ran it. Regional news picked it up. A Nashville television station did a 3-minute segment. Deb on camera, the lakefront behind her. The Chiron reading, Cumberland County Family Land Trust threatens 99 homeowners. My phone rang for 3 days. Reporters, neighbors, a state assemblyman's office, 2 national news aggregators asking for comment. I didn't answer the phone calls I didn't recognize. For the ones I did answer, I gave the same response each time. The Holloway Family Land Trust has held title to this land since 1938. The 2003 survey was fraudulent. The road easement was self-granted on land the grantor didn't own. I am not conducting a land grab. I am defending an 85-year chain of title against a 20-year fraud. For further information, please contact James Okafor's office in Nashville. James had drafted a formal public statement, the same one we'd released on July 2nd, now being distributed actively to every outlet that ran Deb's version. It ran in the Cumberland County Chronicle on July 8th as an op-ed under my name. It laid out the facts in sequence: the 1938 deed, the unbroken title chain, the 1967 survey monument, the 2003 fraudulent survey, Carl Hobbs and his license revocation in 2006 for identical conduct in 3 other counties, the self-granted easement, legally void, legally meaningless, a document that had never created any right from the day it was recorded. Preston Ware, who had collected $48,200,000 from 99 home sales and dissolved his company in 2009, and was currently living in a waterfront home in Sarasota, Florida. The final paragraph. The Holloway Family Land Trust is not the party that put 99 families in this position. Preston Ware is. The trust has held this land for 85 years. We are not asking for anything that isn't already ours under a recorded deed that predates the Lakeshore Commons development by 65 years. We are asking for what the law has always said we have, our land, and a legitimate documented agreement for anyone who needs to use it. The comments on Deb's videos shifted after the Chronicle piece ran. Not dramatically. There was still substantial sympathy for the 99 families, which was appropriate because the 99 families deserved sympathy. But the narrative of Marge as aggressor had developed a crack. People had started asking the question Deb's videos hadn't answered. What happened to Preston Ware? Who is Carl Hobbs? If the title chain goes back to 1938, why does the trust need to conduct a land grab to get land it already owns? The HOA's attorney filed the formal response to the quiet title action on July 28th. 3 defenses: adverse possession, community necessity, equitable estoppel. James had anticipated all 3. We'd discussed them the week before the filing, and he'd told me exactly what they'd argue and exactly why each argument would fail. They were arguments designed to create delay and generate negotiating pressure rather than win on the merits. Delay was Deb's strategy. Use the media to build public pressure. Use the litigation to create a long enough timeline that Marge would decide settling was easier than fighting. Get the story to a place where a Tennessee judge would feel the political weight of ruling against 99 families and in favor of a black woman with an old deed. I'd been a civil engineer for 30 years. I knew what a pressure campaign looked like. I also knew that pressure campaigns work on people who don't know their own position. My position was the 1938 deed, the 1967 survey monument, the Carl Hobbs revocation, the void easement, the unbroken title chain. No amount of TikTok views changes what's in the Cumberland County deed records. But I'd been patient through July and through August. Patient while the quiet title action proceeded through its preliminary stages. Patient while Deb ran her campaign and the HOA's attorney filed motions designed to extend the timeline. In September, I asked James a direct question. How long does the quiet title action take if they fight every step? 18 months to 2 years, maybe longer if they appeal. And during that entire period, Lakeshore Drive continues operating on a void easement across my property. Yes, and the HOA continues telling its residents that they're defending their rights, while Preston Ware sits in Sarasota. That's the current trajectory, yes. I looked out at Lakeshore Drive from the kitchen window. The county highway was visible at the far end, 2.1 miles of road that crossed my property on a document that had never had any legal effect. Every morning, 99 households drove that road. Every morning, they used my land to get to a county highway, and every morning Deb Sinclair told them the Holloway Family Land Trust was the problem. James, what does Tennessee law require for road closure notice on a void easement? He was quiet for a moment, the pause of an attorney who sees where a question is going, and is verifying the answer before he gives it. Tennessee code allows a landowner to close a road crossing their property when there is no valid recorded easement, following 30 days written notice to affected parties. 30 days. 30 days. Delivered by certified mail to the HOA and to Cumberland County Emergency Services. Emergency vehicles are a separate requirement. You'd need to maintain emergency access regardless. Draft the notice. Marge. James, the HOA has had 3 months to request a meeting. They have not requested a meeting. Their attorney has filed 3 motions, all designed to delay rather than resolve. Deb Sinclair has made 47 social media posts about my family's land, without once calling my office to discuss a legitimate access agreement. I paused. I've offered fair terms. I've offered a meeting. I've released the full documentation publicly so that every resident of that community can understand exactly what Preston Ware did and why we're here. The response has been a media campaign and delay motions. The community will be significantly disrupted. The community was significantly disrupted the day Preston Ware filed a fraudulent survey. I didn't do that. He did. I've given the HOA 3 months to negotiate a legitimate agreement. 30 days more is more than the law requires. James drafted the notice. It went out by certified mail on September 15, 2023. The Holloway Family Land Trust was exercising its right as the fee-simple owner of the road corridor to close Lakeshore Drive, effective 30 days from the date of notice. Cumberland County Emergency Services had been separately notified and provided with a gate combination for emergency vehicle access. The trust remained willing to negotiate a permanent recorded easement on fair terms at any time during the notice period or after. The notice period ran 30 days. The HOA's response during those 30 days: 2 more legal motions, 14 more social media posts, a letter from a Tennessee state representative asking the trust to reconsider its aggressive posture toward innocent families, and a local news segment in which Deb stood at the entrance to Lakeshore Drive and described the coming gate closure as an act of cruelty against an entire community. Not one phone call to James's office requesting a meeting, not one letter proposing easement terms, not one acknowledgement that Preston Ware had done anything wrong. On the morning of October 16, 2023, day 31, I drove to the entrance of Lakeshore Drive. The entrance sits at the junction of the county highway and my property. A gravel pull-off on the east side, a wooden post marking the road name, Lakeshore Drive, white letters on green, standard county signage, and a gap in the tree line where the road begins its 2.1-mile run through Holloway Family Land Trust property toward the development. I had a gate. It had been fabricated by a metalwork shop in Crossville, 16-foot galvanized steel, heavy-duty hinges, designed for ranch use where a gate needs to withstand both weather and the occasional impact of something that doesn't see it until it's too late. David Kwan and his assistant had set the gate posts 3 days earlier. 2 6-inch steel posts set in concrete, positioned precisely at the boundary where Lakeshore Drive entered trust property. I swung the gate closed. First lock, a heavy-duty padlock on the latch, keyed. Second lock, a chain through the gate frame in the post, separate padlock, different key. 2 Holloway Family Land Trust no trespassing signs, 18 inches by 24 inches, orange and black, the kind that are visible from a distance, mounted on each post. I stood back and looked at the gate. 1 gate, 2 locks, 2 signs, 2.1 miles of road on the other side of it, 99 homes at the end of that road. I took a photograph for the Trust's records, noted the time, 8:47 a.m., in my field log, and drove back to the house. My phone began ringing at 9:15 a.m. I didn't answer. I had been maintaining those culverts since 2019. When I took over active management of the Holloway Family Land Trust after my father's death, I'd done what any responsible land trust manager does with a new inheritance. I'd walked every acre, identified every structure, noted every maintenance need. The 3 creek crossings along the road corridor had been on my list from the first year. Crossing 1 was the northernmost, a 36-inch corrugated steel culvert under a gravel road surface where Briars Creek passed under the corridor approximately 400 yards from the county highway entrance. The culvert was original to the road construction in 2003, and by 2019, it was showing the kind of stress that 16-year-old corrugated steel shows in a Tennessee creek bed that runs hard in wet seasons. Surface corrosion on the downstream end, minor separation at the joint where the 2 sections met, sediment accumulation on the upstream face that was beginning to restrict flow. I'd had it cleaned in 2019, patched in 2021, scheduled for full replacement in 2024. Crossing 2 was the middle crossing, similar culvert, better condition, minor headwall erosion on the east bank that I'd been watching. Crossing 3 was the southernmost, the most problematic of the 3, a low-water crossing design that had never been ideal for a Tennessee creek with seasonal flood variation. The original installation had used undersized culvert pipe for the drainage area it served, and every wet season it backed up and pushed water across the road surface. I'd been managing all 3 because they were on my land. That's what you do with land. You maintain it, you watch it, you address problems before they become failures. My great-grandmother had understood this. My grandfather had understood it. My father had understood it. The Trust's land stayed in good condition because 4 generations of Holloways had treated maintenance as obligation rather than option. When I closed the gate on October 16th, I stopped maintaining the culverts, not as a strategy, as a statement of fact about what the Trust's maintenance obligations covered and didn't cover. I maintained trust property. The road corridor was trust property. That was the entire legal basis for everything James had filed. But I was not obligated to maintain an active trespass at trust expense. The HOA had been using this road for 20 years, collecting dues from 99 households, operating with a maintenance budget that included line items for road upkeep. They had resources, they had contractors, they had a road that crossed my property under a void easement, and if they wanted to maintain it during the period between gate closure and legal resolution, they were welcome to request a maintenance access agreement. No one called to request one. The first rain event came on November 7th, a slow-moving system from the southwest, the kind of Tennessee fall rain that doesn't look threatening on radar, but drops steady and significant over 36 hours. By the time it cleared on November 9th, the total accumulation at the Cumberland County gauge nearest the property was 4.2 inches. David Kwan had driven by the county highway end of the road corridor on November 10th. Routine, he was in the area, and called me that afternoon. Crossing 1 is gone. I drove out the next morning. The culvert at Crossing 1 had been in marginal condition since 2019. 4 years of deferred full replacement. I'd managed it with patches and cleanings, while the replacement was on the 2024 schedule. The 4.2-inch event had done what a compromised culvert does when a significant water volume arrives faster than restricted flow can handle. It had backed up the upstream face, built pressure against the road fill on both sides of the culvert, and blown out. The road surface had collapsed into a washout 2 feet deep and 14 feet across, the full lane width plus the gravel shoulders on both sides. The downstream end of the culvert was visible in the creek bed 6 feet below the road surface, separated from its head wall and lying at an angle that would have been familiar to any civil engineer who'd seen a culvert failure. The road was impassable at Crossing 1, not inconveniently narrow, not rough, impassable. A vehicle attempting to cross would drop 2 feet into a creek crossing with no road surface remaining. I photographed it from 6 angles, noted it in the trust's maintenance log with the notation, "Culvert failure, no repair scheduled pending easement resolution," and drove back to the house. 2 weeks later, on November 24th, a second system came through. Smaller, 2.8 inches over 18 hours, but Crossing 3 had never needed much to fail. The undersized culvert backed up, as it always backed up in wet weather, and this time the water it pushed across the road surface found the weakened shoulder fill that years of marginal maintenance had been holding together. The south shoulder gave way first, then the road fill on the upstream side. By the time the rain stopped, Crossing 3 had a washout of similar dimensions to Crossing 1. Full lane width, 2 feet of drop, the culvert pipe separated and partially displaced. 2 impassable washouts on a 2.1-mile road. Even if someone opened my gate, the road couldn't be driven. Deb Sinclair called me on November 26th. I answered. Her voice had the controlled quality of a woman who had been operating in public relations mode for 4 months and was now confronting a situation that public relations could not solve. Ms. Holloway, not Marge. Ms. Holloway, the formal address of someone who has decided that civility is the current tactical position. The road. There are washouts, 2 of them. People cannot get out. Ms. Sinclair, I kept my voice even and factual. I have not closed any emergency access. Cumberland County Emergency Services was notified before the gate closed in October and has the gate combination for emergency vehicle access. That notification is on record with the county. Emergency vehicles can't cross a 2-foot washout. The emergency vehicle access gate is at the county highway end of the corridor. Emergency services enter from the county highway and proceed to whatever point the road is passable. For medical emergencies in the northern portion of the development, the section accessible before Crossing 1, the road is fully passable. For emergencies in the southern section, emergency services have the gate combination and can assess access conditions the same way they would for any rural road during a flood event. You have to fix the road. I have been maintaining the culverts on this road corridor for 4 years at trust expense. 3 culvert maintenance events since 2019, documented in the trust's maintenance records. I paused. The road crosses Holloway Family Land Trust property under a void easement. The trust is not obligated to maintain a road it doesn't use, on behalf of parties who have declined to negotiate a legitimate access agreement for 4 months. You're letting the road wash away on purpose. I'd expected this line. I'd thought about how to answer it precisely. I am not maintaining a trespass, I said. There's a difference between deliberately destroying something and declining to repair it at your own expense. I have not touched those culverts since October 16th. Nature has. The culverts were in marginal condition. I was managing them with the 2024 replacement scheduled. That schedule no longer applies. People have children. People have jobs. People can't get out of their neighborhood. People have been getting out of their neighborhood on a road that crosses my family's land for 20 years without a valid easement, without compensating the trust, and without acknowledging who owns the ground their road runs through. My voice stayed level. I have offered a fair, permanent easement. I have offered a meeting. I have offered to negotiate an interim access agreement at any point during the past 4 months. The HOA's response has been litigation motions and social media. Silence on the line. "What do you want?" she said finally. The question had a different quality than anything she'd asked before. Not the media-polished framing of a public relations campaign. Something more direct and more honest. "A meeting," I said. "James Okafor's office. You, your attorney, and the authority to negotiate. A legitimate, permanent easement, properly recorded, properly compensated. That's all I have ever wanted." She didn't respond to that directly. "I'll talk to our attorney," she said. "Good." She hung up. James called me the following morning. "Marge, I've been contacted by 3 attorneys who are not the HOA's attorney. Title insurers. All 3 carriers. Meridian Title, Continental Land Title, and First American. Their policyholders, the 99 homeowners, have filed claims triggered by the quiet title action. The insurers have opened claim files and retained litigation counsel." He paused. "Marge, title insurers in this situation have a dual obligation. They defend their policyholders' title positions, but they also know when a title position is indefensible. And they know. They know. I spoke with the lead attorney for Meridian. They cover 61 of the 99 homes. She was direct with me. They've reviewed the Holloway title chain, the 1967 survey monument, the Carl Hobbs revocation, and the self-granted easement. Their internal assessment is that the fraudulent survey is legally indefensible and that the Holloway Family Land Trust will prevail on the quiet title action." He paused. She asked if the trust would be willing to negotiate a global resolution, a package that addresses both the land ownership question and the road access, structured in a way that their policyholders' interests are protected going forward. What does that mean in practical terms? A permanent recorded ground lease or easement package for the 340 acres in the road corridor. Long-term, documented, title insured going forward. The insurers would fund the settlement, using their policy obligations to their policyholders as the mechanism. They'd also be pursuing subrogation claims against Preston Ware independently. They're going to go after Preston Ware. 3 title insurance companies with a combined claim exposure of $61,380,000 are going to pursue the man who caused that exposure. He paused. "Marge, Preston Ware is going to have a very difficult year in Sarasota." I looked out at the lake, the late November light on Holloway Lake. The eastern shoreline, my shoreline, bare-treed now, the water gray-green in the fall light. The Lakeshore Commons rooftops visible through the stripped branches on the far shore. "Tell Meridian we'll negotiate," I said, directly with James, "the terms I've offered since July. Fair permanent easement for the road corridor. Long-term ground lease for the 340 acres. All properly recorded and title insured." "And Deb?" I thought about Deb Sinclair's question on the phone. "What do you want?" It was the first honest question she'd asked in 4 months. "Deb can participate in the negotiation," I said, "or she can keep posting videos. The title insurers are going to settle this regardless of what she does. The question is whether she wants to be in the room when it happens. I'll call Meridian's attorney." "James," I paused, "make sure they understand one thing. I'm not settling the quiet title action. The fraudulent survey gets expunged from the Cumberland County record. That's not negotiable. The Holloway Family Land Trust ownership is confirmed by the court, on record, permanently. The settlement is about the access agreements that follow that confirmation, not about whether the confirmation happens. Understood? The deed is the deed. I'll make sure they understand." The summary judgment hearing was January 14th, 2024. James had filed the motion in December, after the 2 culvert washouts, after the title insurers had made contact, after 4 months of Deb's media campaign had failed to produce a single legitimate negotiating offer from the HOA's own counsel. The motion argued that the material facts were undisputed, and that the legal questions were resolvable without trial. The material facts were: the Holloway Family Land Trust had held fee simple title to 1,100 acres of Cumberland County land since April 7, 1938. The title chain was unbroken, documented, and certified by independent examination. The 2003 Ware Development Boundary Survey had been prepared by Carl Hobbs, a licensed surveyor whose license was revoked in 2006 for identical fraudulent conduct in 3 other Tennessee counties. The survey had described 340 acres of Holloway Family Land Trust property as part of the Ware development parcel without any conveyance, any purchase, or any legal mechanism by which that ownership could have transferred. The road easement recorded simultaneously, document 2003-07841, named Ware Development LLC as both grantor and grantee, on land the grantor had no title to convey. The HOA's response brief had been 41 pages, 3 defenses: adverse possession, community necessity, equitable estoppel. James had replied to each in 11 pages, because 11 pages was all it took when the facts were that clean. Judge Patricia Odom had been on the Cumberland County Circuit Court bench for 19 years. James described her to me before the hearing with characteristic directness, patient with facts, brief with arguments that substituted sympathy for law. I attended. The hearing room was full, an unusual circumstance for a civil motions hearing, but this was not a usual situation. A dozen Lakeshore Commons residents sat in the gallery. 3 title insurance company attorneys sat at a separate table to the right. Deb Sinclair sat beside the HOA's attorney at the defense table, composed and watchful. The HOA's attorney presented the 3 defenses in 40 minutes. Adverse possession, 20 years of open, continuous, notorious use of the road, and the 340 acres established prescriptive rights, regardless of the original survey's validity. Community necessity, 99 families, $61 million in residential property value. The equitable hardship of enforcement outweighed the technical property claim. Equitable estoppel. The trust had known about the development, or should have known, and its silence for 20 years constituted an implicit representation that it did not contest the HOA's use. Judge Odom listened without interruption. Then she opened the case file and reviewed it for 4 minutes in silence. She started with adverse possession. Counsel, the adverse possession claim requires that the claimant possess the property hostilely, under a claim of right, without the true owner's permission. The Holloway Family Land Trust title was never extinguished by the 2003 survey. A fraudulent survey creates a cloud on title. It does not transfer ownership. The trust's fee simple title remained intact throughout the entire period of the HOA's claimed adverse use. She set down the brief. You cannot adversely possess land from an owner whose title remained intact throughout the period of claimed adverse use. The hostile element requires that the true owner's title be displaced. It was not displaced. The claim fails on its fundamental element. The HOA's attorney. Your Honor, the HOA had no knowledge that the survey was fraudulent. The HOA's knowledge of the fraud is relevant to their culpability, not to the legal character of their use. Their use was either hostile or it wasn't. Since the grantor of their road easement had no title to convey, their use was, from a property law standpoint, trespass, not adverse possession under a claim of right. The claim fails. She moved to community necessity. The court recognizes the genuine hardship that this proceeding creates for 99 homeowners who purchased their properties in good faith. That hardship is real, and this court does not minimize it. She looked up. But community necessity doctrine addresses situations where enforcement of a property right would produce an inequity arising from the property owner's own conduct or representation. The hardship here was created by Preston Ware's survey fraud, not by the Holloway Family Land Trust's legitimate title enforcement. The trust did not place these families in this position. A developer who collected $48 million and moved to Florida placed them in this position. She set down the brief. The court cannot use equitable doctrine to transfer the consequences of a third party's fraud onto an innocent property owner. Equitable estoppel. The estoppel claim requires that the trust made a representation, express or implied, upon which the homeowners reasonably relied to their detriment. The trust made no representation to these homeowners. It did not know about the fraud for 20 years. It could not have waived rights it didn't know were being infringed. She closed the file. You cannot estop a party from asserting rights they were unaware were being violated. She looked at both tables. All 3 defenses are dismissed. Summary judgment is granted in favor of the Holloway Family Land Trust on the quiet title action. She signed the order. The 2003 Ware Development Boundary Survey, document 2003-00891 in the Cumberland County Register of Deeds, is hereby declared fraudulent and void. The Cumberland County Register of Deeds is directed to expunge the survey from the public record and annotate the filing accordingly. Document 2003-07841, the Ware Development Road Easement, is hereby declared void ab initio, having been executed by a grantor with no title to the burdened property. The Holloway Family Land Trust is declared the sole fee simple owner of all 1,100 acres described in the 1938 deed chain, including the 340 acres absorbed by the fraudulent 2003 survey and the 2.1-mile road corridor known as Lakeshore Drive. The hearing room was very quiet. I sat in the gallery and looked at the order. 85 years of clean title, confirmed by a court in 19 minutes. James filed in Sarasota County, Florida, on February 3rd. Preston Ware was 74 years old. He lived in a 4-bedroom waterfront home on Little Sarasota Bay, a property assessed at $1,900,000. He held investment accounts totaling approximately $890,000. He had a 40% interest in a marina operation on the Intracoastal Waterway, valued at approximately $410,000. Total Florida assets, approximately $3,200,000. The claim was straightforward: survey fraud. Preston Ware had directed Carl Hobbs, a surveyor with a documented history of fraudulent boundary work, to file a survey that absorbed 340 acres of Holloway Family Land Trust property into the Ware development parcel. This was fraud, documented, established, and now confirmed by the Cumberland County Circuit Court's summary judgment order. Title fraud. The self-granted road easement constituted a fraudulent recording designed to create a false appearance of legal road access where none existed. Unjust enrichment. Preston Ware had collected $48,200,000 in home sale proceeds from 99 families on the basis of a fraudulent title position. The measure of unjust enrichment was not limited to the trust's direct damages. It encompassed the full value of the benefit Ware had obtained through fraud. The complaint requested $61,380,000 in damages. The current combined residential value of the 99 homes sitting on fraudulently claimed land, plus 20 years of road trespass damages at fair market rate. Preston Ware was served on February 12th. His Florida attorney called James on February 14th. His client wants to discuss resolution. He had been living in Sarasota for 15 years. He had, by all accounts, spent those 15 years believing that the distance between him and Cumberland County, Tennessee, was sufficient insulation from what he'd done in 2003. He had dissolved his company. He had sold his Tennessee properties. He had moved to a waterfront home on Little Sarasota Bay, and apparently concluded that the fraud was safely behind him. He had not anticipated David Kwan's survey instruments finding 2 monuments at the same boundary point in June 2023. He had not anticipated the Holloway Family Land Trust's attorney filing in Sarasota County with a Cumberland County summary judgment order already in hand. He had not anticipated 3 title insurance companies with a combined claim exposure of $61,380,000 and their own subrogation rights against the party who'd caused that exposure, adding their legal weight to the proceeding. The settlement negotiations lasted 6 weeks. Preston Ware's total liquid and semi-liquid assets were approximately $3,200,000. His waterfront home, once a forced sale was factored against a Florida homestead exemption claim his attorney advanced, netted approximately $1,600,000 toward settlement. His investment accounts, $890,000. His marina interest, sold under duress to a buyer who knew it was a distress sale, $310,000. Total available, $2,800,000. His liability insurer, a general commercial policy that covered his development activities, bears still active through a tail coverage provision, contributed an additional $2 million after extended negotiation. Total settlement, $4,800,000. Not $61,380,000. Not even close to the full measure of what his fraud had cost. But $4,800,000 was what the combined pressure of James's lawsuit, 3 title insurance subrogation claims, and the reality of Preston Ware's asset position could produce in 60 days. He signed the settlement agreement on March 28th. He sold his waterfront home on Little Sarasota Bay the same week. He moved to a rental apartment in Bradenton. The $4,800,000 was distributed, $2,100,000 to the Holloway Family Land Trust as direct damages for survey fraud, title fraud, and 20 years of road trespass. The remaining $2,700,000 was distributed among the 3 title insurers as partial restitution against their claim exposure, a fraction of their total liability, but a meaningful contribution to the settlement fund that would ultimately fund the road restoration and the new access agreements. The title insurance negotiations had been running parallel to the Florida litigation since November. Meridian Title's lead attorney, a Nashville woman named Carol Stein, who'd been handling title claims litigation for 22 years, had been in contact with James weekly since their first call in November. She was precise, unsentimental about the legal realities, and genuinely motivated to reach a resolution that protected her 61 policyholders' long-term interests. Continental Land, Title, and First American had joined the negotiating table by December. 3 insurers, 99 policyholders, 1 land trust, 1 attorney on each side, and a framework that James and Carol Stein had been building incrementally since the first week of December. The summary judgment order in January had clarified the legal foundation. The Florida settlement in March had produced the funding mechanism. By April, the framework was ready to document. The settlement package had 3 components. First, a permanent recorded easement for Lakeshore Drive, the 2.1-mile corridor from the county highway through Holloway Family Land Trust property to the Lakeshore Commons development, 30-year term with renewal rights, annual easement fee at current Cumberland County fair market rate, $18,400 per year, established by comparable easement transactions that James had pulled from the county records. Title insured, recorded in Cumberland County. Second, a ground lease structure for the 340 acres on which the Lakeshore Commons development had been built. Long-term, 50 years, renewable, at a ground rent rate negotiated by James and Carol Stein over 3 weeks of back and forth that had required more patience than most of the litigation. The rate reflected current Cumberland County lakefront ground lease comparables. Each of the 99 homeowners received an individual ground lease document, their own agreement with the Holloway Family Land Trust, clearly written, plain language summary on page 1, title insured. Third, a remediation fund for road restoration. The 2 washed-out culverts at Crossing 1 and Crossing 3, and the deferred maintenance on Crossing 2, would be addressed by a contractor retained by the settlement fund. The work was scheduled for May. Weather permitting, both crossings would be restored to full passability before the summer driving season. The settlement documents were signed April 15, 2024, recorded in Cumberland County April 17th. Title insurance policies issued to all 99 homeowners by April 22nd. New policies, covering their leasehold interests under the ground lease structure, replacing the now worthless policies that had been issued on the basis of Preston Ware's fraudulent survey. The road restoration crew arrived May 6th. Deb Sinclair had not been in the room for the settlement negotiations. She had been invited. James had extended the invitation in November, the same week I'd told him that Deb could participate if she chose to. She had declined through HOA counsel, citing her position that the HOA should not legitimize the trust's claims by negotiating with them. The title insurers had negotiated without her. The community meeting held in late April, called by a group of Lakeshore Commons residents who had retained their own separate counsel to represent their individual interests, distinct from the HOA's collective position, had lasted 4 hours. Carol Stein had presented the settlement terms. James had answered questions. The residents had asked exactly the questions you'd expect from 99 families who'd spent 10 months watching a legal dispute threaten the most significant financial asset most of them owned. The vote on whether to accept the settlement terms had been 94-5. The 5 dissenting votes included Deb Sinclair's. The community election for HOA president was held in May. Deb received 8 votes. The new president, a retired teacher named Howard Bell, who'd been one of the first residents to call for direct negotiation with the trust back in November, received 91. The road restoration was completed on May 19th. The contractor, a civil excavation firm out of Crossville that James had recommended from his experience with Cumberland County construction, had spent 2 weeks on the 3 crossings. Crossing 1 and Crossing 3 were full replacements. New culvert pipe, properly sized for the drainage area each crossing served. Concrete head walls on both ends. Compacted road fill and gravel surface restored to grade. Crossing 2 received the maintenance work it had needed since 2019. Head wall repair, bank stabilization, sediment removal. When the contractor finished, Lakeshore Drive was in better condition than it had been at any point in the 20 years since Preston Ware had built it, which was, in a specific and practical sense, exactly what 85 years of Holloway land management looked like. I removed the gate on May 20th, not because the gate had been wrong. It had been correct, legally and factually, from the first day I'd installed it. I removed it because the settlement documents were recorded. The easement was permanent, the ground leases were signed, and the gate's purpose had been fulfilled. Lakeshore Drive was now operating under a legitimate recorded easement for the first time in its existence. The road that crossed my family's land finally had the documentation it should have had in 2003 when Preston Ware built it. The gate post stayed. David Kwan had suggested that, a practical consideration for land management. Posts without a gate are useful for future purposes, and the concrete footings were good work. I had the crossbar removed and the hinges capped, and left the posts standing at the entrance to the corridor. A reminder, if anyone needed one, of what had been there. Howard Bell had called me the week after his election to thank me for the settlement negotiation. He was measured and honest in the way that people who've watched something go wrong for a long time, and finally seen it resolved, tend to be. "Ms. Holloway," he said, "I want to be direct with you. This community owes you an apology for how this was handled. You offered a fair meeting in June 2023. We should have taken it. You weren't the HOA president in June 2023. No, but I'm the HOA president now, and I want you to know that the Lakeshore Commons Community Association understands what the ground lease means, understands who owns the land, and intends to honor the agreements in the spirit they were negotiated. That's all I ever asked for," I said. It was. The final accounting. Preston Ware's settlement, $4,800,000. Of that, $2,100,000 went directly to the Holloway Family Land Trust, compensation for survey fraud, title fraud, and 20 years of road trespass damages. The remaining $2,700,000 was distributed to the 3 title insurers as partial restitution against their claim exposure, contributing to the fund that covered the road restoration and the legal costs of the settlement process. The title insurance settlement, the package negotiated by Carol Stein and James on behalf of the 99 homeowners, produced an additional $2,100,000 in direct trust compensation, funded through the insurer's policy obligations and their portion of the Preston Ware recovery. Total compensation to the Holloway Family Land Trust, $4,200,000, 20 years of road trespass, a fraudulent survey that had sat in the Cumberland County public record for 20 years, a cloud on the title of 1,100 acres that had required a lawsuit, a summary judgment motion, and 10 months of litigation to resolve. $4,200,000 did not fully capture what Preston Ware had cost my family's land, in terms of the cloud on title, the years of uncompensated use, or the 10 months of litigation that had consumed the better part of a year of my life. But it was what the legal process had produced. The fraudulent survey was expunged from the Cumberland County public record on April 17th. The annotated entry in the Register of Deeds, void and fraudulent, expunged by order of Cumberland County Circuit Court, January 14th, 2024. The Holloway Family Land Trust deed, recorded April 7th, 1938 by Ruth Holloway, remained exactly where it had always been. My granddaughter Zoe visited in June. She was 17, finishing her junior year of high school, and had spent the previous 2 years announcing with increasing certainty that she intended to study law. She had followed the Lakeshore Commons situation from the beginning. I'd kept her informed because the land was part of her inheritance, and she had a right to understand both what it was and what defending it required. We walked the eastern lakefront on a Saturday afternoon, June in Cumberland County. The lake at its fullest and most specific, the particular blue-green of Holloway Lake in summer, the water level high from the spring rainfall, the eastern shoreline lush and private and completely itself. The 1.1 miles of lakefront that Ruth Holloway had owned since 1938, that had been absorbed into a developer's fraudulent survey in 2003, that had been confirmed as Holloway property by a court order in January. Ours. Had always been ours. Was now documented as ours, with a specificity that would survive any future examination. Jo walked beside me without speaking for a while. She had my mother's quality of comfortable silence, the ability to be in a place without immediately filling it with words. We stopped at the point where the eastern shoreline curved north, the best view of the full lake, the Lakeshore Commons development just visible on the far shore, the afternoon light doing what afternoon light on a Tennessee lake does in June. "Grandma," she turned to me, "did you feel bad? Closing the road, 99 families." I'd been waiting for that question, not from Zoe specifically, from anyone who'd followed the situation honestly and arrived at the place an honest person arrives. The gate had caused real disruption for families who hadn't committed fraud. "I felt responsible," I said. "There's a difference." She looked at me. "Responsible for what?" "For not letting 20 years of fraud become permanent by doing nothing." I paused. Those families deserved to know what Preston Ware had done. They deserved accurate title documentation and legitimate recorded agreements. They were not getting those things as long as everyone agreed to pretend the fraudulent survey was valid. I looked at the lake. Closing the road was not comfortable, but leaving it open on a void easement, letting another year pass, another 5 years, another 10, that would have been the real harm, to them and to this land. Zoe was quiet for a moment. "Deb kept saying you were doing a land grab." Deb was wrong about the facts and right about the fear. The fear was real. 99 families facing an uncertain title position is genuinely frightening. The facts were that I wasn't taking anything. I was holding what my family had held since 1938. I paused. She mistook enforcement for aggression. They're different things. Zoe looked at the far shore, the Lakeshore Commons rooftops through the summer trees. "They're still there," she said. "The homes. They were always going to be there. The question was whether the people in them would have legitimate documented title, real ground leases, real easements, real recorded agreements that would protect them in any future transaction or dispute. They have that now." I paused. "They didn't have it before. Preston Ware made sure they didn't." She was quiet for a moment longer. Then she asked the question I hadn't expected. Not because it was surprising, but because it was the right question, and she was 17 and already asking the right ones. What did great-great-grandma see in this land? In 1938, in Tennessee? I looked at Holloway Lake, the water, the light, the 340 acres of eastern shoreline that a developer had claimed for 20 years, and that a court had returned to us in January. The western shoreline where my grandfather's dock still stood, patched and functional, and older than most of the buildings in Cumberland County. The lake that was entirely enclosed within Holloway property, 340 acres of water that my great-grandmother had understood when she signed the deed in 1938, would belong to her family as completely as the land around it. "Something worth holding," I said. Zoe looked at the lake for a long moment. Then she nodded, slowly. The way a person nods when they've received an answer that will take years to fully understand, but that they recognize immediately as true. We stood at the eastern lakefront of Holloway Lake until the light began to change. Margaret Holloway's family had owned 1,100 acres of Tennessee lakefront land since 1938. In 2003, a developer named Preston Ware had filed a fraudulent survey that absorbed 340 of those acres into his development parcel, built 99 luxury homes on land he didn't own, collected $48 million from 99 families, and moved to Sarasota, Florida. Marge had found out 20 years later while planning a boat launch. She didn't call the HOA, she called her attorney. When the HOA refused to negotiate and went to social media instead, Marge closed the road and stopped maintaining the culverts. 2 rain events handled the rest. The Cumberland County Circuit Court granted summary judgment in January 2024. The fraudulent survey was expunged. The void easement was declared void. The Holloway Family Land Trust was confirmed as the sole owner of all 1,100 acres. The same land Ruth Holloway had purchased in 1938, unchanged in ownership through 85 years of American history. Preston Ware sold his Sarasota waterfront home to fund a $4,800,000 settlement. Deb Sinclair received 8 votes in the HOA presidential election. The Holloway family had held that lake for 85 years. Deb Sinclair found out what that looks like when the owner finally decides to use it.